Hello, welcome to another weekly update. I hope you're doing well. This is also the first time of doing a weekly update that we're doing straight to LinkedIn Live. So that should be interesting. Kind of been looking at LinkedIn Live for a while and, something I've been meaning to get onto and just haven't had the chance. And then over the weekend, just gave some thought to how to build it into the workflow because, as you know, this is, it's a YouTube video, it's a podcast, it's a blog post. So just kind of figuring out how LinkedIn Live can fit into all of that. But I think I've got a way that should work really well. We'll see. I think it's really good actually because it means I can do a little bit more on LinkedIn because if you upload a video to LinkedIn, you're limited to 10 minutes. Whereas if you're live streaming, you can go for as long as you like. So, and that's good because today we've got a lot to get through. There's a lot that happened this week. So I've got my coffee. With my fancy Microsoft mug. And we have a lot of things to get through. So without any more messing around, let's get started. So I did 2 blog posts this week. The first one was around bot framework. So let's ease ourselves in with some new functionality for the Microsoft bot framework, shall we? All right, so there's new stuff you can do now to be notified if a user edits or deletes a message in conversation with your bot. Now, why on earth would a user want to do that? Don't know. It's going to be pretty disruptive to your workflow if users start editing messages that get sent to the bot. And I feel like a couple of years ago, probably we wouldn't have expected very much from an application, but actually like your app could deal with that really well now because there's new functionality, there's new ways of knowing when a user deletes a message, undeletes a message, or edits a message in conversation with a bot. You get basically new event handlers. And I quite like the way that this is the way this has been implemented because it means that you can opt into it. It's not going to break any code if you don't do anything with this. But if you do, you're going to get a really, really nice bot experience. Let me just quickly show you the blog post. You can see, let me just go down a little bit. There's 3 new event handlers on Teams Message Edit Async, on Teams Message Soft Delete Async, and on Teams Message Undelete Async. You can override those if you want to, and you can do something with them. What exactly you're going to do, I don't know. If you've already kicked off an action and then the user edits it to say actually do something else, maybe you can wind that action back and do something else. It's going to be pretty disruptive, but hey, you've got options. Then I put a whole bit at the bottom of this about do you need to do this? And this I think is kind of an interesting conversation. So should you rush out and implement this straight away? I don't know. It depends what your users are like. Do your users do a lot of deleting and editing of messages to their bots? I don't know. You might already know the answer to that, but I can completely imagine this now showing up. Like if you're really into it, if you're a QA, you're a tester, you're a project manager, whatever, or product manager, sorry, you're really into things, you might add this in as a test case and then be like, all our apps break because users can now edit messages and the bot doesn't respond to it. You need to fix it. And then I can also imagine developers being like, that's an awful lot of work. Are you really sure you want to commit us to doing all this work? How often is it going to happen? And how often is it going to happen is critical to figuring out, I think, before you need to do the work. There's no point doing this work if it's going to be like a 0.1% chance of happening. Okay, so how do you solve that problem? You measure. So use these overrides, implement them, but don't do anything with them. Implement them, like concrete implement them, and then put like telemetry behind them. So log how many times they get hit. That way you'll know how many times users delete a message to the bot, undelete a message, or edit a message. Based on that, then go and take some action. Okay, that would be my recommendation to you. Don't rush it out and implement this straight away if you know, unless you know you need to. Like if you already have this as a problem that you know needs fixing, great, off you go. If you're not sure whether you should implement this or not, I would suggest go and do some monitoring first, do some measuring first, and then you'll know. Because if you don't measure, you don't know. All right, let's talk about the big issue of the day, or the big issue of the week, the Elgato Stream Deck plugin. All right, so exciting news this week. Microsoft came out with an integration for the Elgato Stream Deck plugin. It's been talked about a lot on social media and elsewhere. So I'm not going to go into it in loads of detail around the announcement, other than to say you've probably heard about it. If you haven't, stop watching this, go and find out what that is. But anyway, you can now use your Stream Deck plugin to control meeting actions. And this was interesting, and I did a blog post in the week around why this is interesting, because it means there is some kind of client-side API that Microsoft has into Teams. And that's interesting. And I talked through in the blog post, I talked through some of the capabilities, and I promised another follow-up blog post with more details once I've figured it out. And since then, I have been inundated with people asking where that blog post is. That blog post is coming, and I know, you don't have to tell me anymore, I know if you look around on the internet, you can find other people talking about some of this stuff. The reason I haven't done a blog post on this yet, there's a few reasons. First, I want the information to be accurate, and that A, takes a little bit of time and takes a little bit of back and forth. B, I want the information to be correct over time and not temporal. What do I mean by that? I still get emails from people and messages from people trying to do something in Link and in Skype for Business on-premise against a service that was turned off maybe a year ago because people don't look at the dates in blog posts. So I'm really aware how long-lived blog posts can be. And so if I'm going to tell you how to use a particular API, how to do something with a particular API, I need to make sure that it is the right information. First of all, that's important, but also that it's going to be correct over time. And there's some things happening right now that mean I am not ready to push that blog post out yet, but I am going to do so. The flip side for you is that you know that when the blog post comes out, the information in it is going to be checked and accurate, and you're going to be able to rely on it over time. That takes some time. It takes some kind of back and forth with different people, figuring out, what works, what doesn't, and lots of other things as well. So that's kind of where we're at with that. There will be a blog post on it. I know everybody wants one. I know other people have one. That's fine. That's good. More people is good. Mine will come when it comes, but I'm trying to hold to a certain standard. So that's what I'm doing. So, yep. That's all I think is sensible to say about that. All right, let's go on, because there's still 5 other things to talk about, which is like quite a lot for a weekly update, given that we do one every week. In the last week, all these things have happened. So that's exciting. I think we're definitely past that post-Christmas, post-New Year. Everyone's back at Microsoft. Everybody's doing things, which is really good. And everybody's kicking off the year actually talking about their stuff, which is great. It's really good to see people so vocal and so engaged and, wanting to integrate the community into the things they're doing. So that's really, really good. Okay. There's a new blog post on the Microsoft Dev Blogs blog, all around using Teams Toolkit. I think probably I've talked through some of this before, but this blog post itself is new. So I just wanted to cover it because it's a good 101 on developing apps using the Teams Toolkit. And obviously, I've definitely talked about the Teams Toolkit before. And I don't think there's anything massively new in here, but this is a great roundup of how to use it, the benefits it brings, and there's a learning path that you can get yourself on. And like I say, I think I've talked about this learning path before, but I can't really remember anymore. But it's calling out there is a learning path that you can use. You can jump on to get up to speed quickly with using the Teams Toolkit. And there's a whole bunch of links as well. So if you're looking to get started building on Microsoft Teams, building apps for Teams, the toolkit is a really, really good place to start. It takes away a lot of the complexity. It takes away a lot of the wiring up and all the stuff that's not to do with actually writing the code. It takes away. And actually, if you don't have any of that stuff, it is quite a process, getting to a Teams app running, especially if you're running the code locally and you want to render it in the Teams client. There's a whole bunch of stuff that needs to go on there. And actually the toolkit makes that really, really easy. So I definitely recommend the toolkit. Even if you're a seasoned Teams app developer, I know you probably have your own way of doing things. It's worth checking out the toolkit to see if what they have, makes some things easier or whatever. Okay, let's jump to another devlogs post, and this one now changing and sort of shifting gears completely, let's talk about Azure Communication Services, because they're also out and about this year, pushing their stuff. And there's a really nice blog post and little example, I suppose, around building a meetings app using Azure Communication Services and Teams. Now, I'm super familiar with this idea. I do talks on it, and the process that they go through is kind of similar. So if you kind of have seen those talks and you didn't like my code that came with them and you want to try a different way of doing it, or if you haven't, this is quite a good blog post for really showcasing what you can do quickly with Azure Communication Services. Specifically, what they do here is they use Azure Communication Services to back end the kind of creation of a meeting, and then people can join it using Teams, and they can also join it using a web app. And that's a great B2C scenario that you can light up really, really quickly. If you've seen me do I can't remember what the title of the talk is, it's like Teams B2C in one session or something. I go through this process inside of the session time, and build out an application that basically minimal application that, you could have a user on one end without Teams and a user with Teams on the other end, drop them into a meeting space and they can talk. And that's really powerful for all sorts of things like customer services, healthcare, finance. There's a bunch of different applications for that. Yep. This is a good blog post to go through if you want to try doing that yourself, or if you're just interested in how you can use Azure Communication Services to do that, and how hard it would be or otherwise. It's pretty easy. The great thing of these cool composite controls, because it means you don't have to lay out all of the UI of a calling experience in a web page. All that's done for you. Now you're going to get to the point where you want to, and you want to start changing some of that stuff. That's fine. But for quickly getting something up and running, I think this is a really good approach. All right, let's shift gears again to another kind of welcome to 2023 post. It feels like every product manager out there is doing their like, hooray, it's 2023. Let's reset. Let's get everyone back on board. And let's go now to Vesa Juvonen, who's doing something around SharePoint Framework. SPFx. So this is a good blog post if you are not an SPFx developer. Now, I'm not an SPFx developer by trade. I've done them. I've just never had like a jobby job that I get paid to build extensions or anything like that. And I've not come from that SharePoint background, but I know lots and lots of you have. But if you haven't, this might be a good blog post if you've never got into it and you're kind of curious, because those SPFx extensions are not going away. And in fact, they're kind of spreading out from SharePoint. They're spreading into Teams. They're spreading elsewhere. They're going to be, I think, an important part of the puzzle alongside adaptive cards, and alongside the way that you can bring apps into not only Teams, but into Outlook and Office.com. I think SPFx experiences are going to be interesting, and they're going to stay, and you're going to see them bleed out into Viva. We're already seeing them bleed out into Viva, and I imagine there's probably other places that they could go as well. So they're worth understanding, and this is a good blog post for getting to grips with them for the first time. Vesa's a great blog post writer, if you like. He's a very good communicator of ideas and processes, and the whole process and how it works. So this is a good blog post for kind of going through what they are, where they fit, how they work. I love this. This is cool. Showing you how they work alongside everything else that you already know about, which is good. It really kind of places the technology for you in your head. I find that useful so you understand like where it fits and what you can do with it. And then a whole bunch of links for how you get started, which is really, really useful if you just need to upskill quickly. So great blog post, really good resource. Definitely recommend you kind of bookmark this one if you think you might need to do anything with SPFx in the future. Then bookmark this blog post so that you've got that handy link, whole list of references you can use, as well as this nice kind of positioning piece on what it is and where it sits. Okay, let's 2 more things left. Told you there was lots going on. Let's talk about the Microsoft Graph Developer Proxy. Now, we've talked about this before Christmas. It came out, and then They revved it over Christmas. They've come up with different versions already since then, and there's another one out. And I'm going to highlight them every time because I think their pace of change is really impressive. The way they're kind of throwing stuff out quickly. But what I really like about it is that they are listening to the community and revving the versions based on kind of what they're hearing in the community. So they're directly adding things that people have asked for, which I think is really cool. So in this latest version, which is 0.4 release version 0.4, they've improved the console output, which is really nice. And now it looks really cool. You can really kind of see quickly in like a big stream of events. You can see quickly what's happening. They've introduced nerd font icons, which is amazing. What I really like is they do a lot of this, like here's a warning about something, but then they link to like here's some more information so you can find out more. I think that's really useful, so you can get the context and understand why they're telling you about those things. Other things. There's this like notification if it notices you're using the beta endpoint. I think that's hugely useful for organizations who are like, and I've been there, where you're not really sure if you're using the beta endpoint or not, and you know you shouldn't be, and you're probably not, but did it slide in somewhere just to get something done? You're not really sure, and other than kind of searching through the code, how are you going to know? This allows you to do all sorts of good testing around V1 versus beta. It's a nice way of kind of calling out, like doing it, and it will call out if it notices you're making those calls. And also the last thing, which is really interesting, is that there's a plugin system now. They've kind of implemented support for, plugins. So as an organization, you can add your own functionality to this, whatever that might be, searching for particular, calls that you don't want to make or you do want to make, or whatever else it is. So this is really building out into a really powerful tool for developers. So if you haven't seen it before, if you haven't tried it, if you're not using it, but you are making applications that use Graph, you really need to get this tool. You really need to go and have a look at it and get on board with it and build it into your tool chain, build it into your CI/CD process, build it into your devs process. I would put it everywhere and just have it on in the background. Because it's a really useful ongoing test as much as anything else. I think you could use it in a few different ways. You could give it to developers to make it easier for them to test those kind of chaos moments of 503s, 500s, throttling. You could do that, but also I would put it into a CI/CD pipeline and just have it there helping out. Maybe doing the occasional checks, maybe bubbling up the warnings and stuff like that. I think it's a useful thing to have in the mix, I think. All right, and finally, I didn't mean for this to happen, but never mind. We're going to end on a slight bit of a downer, but maybe I'll think of something after this to bring us back up again. I don't know what it's going to be though, but let's get the names right. The Microsoft 365 Teams Application Developer Associate certification, which came out 2 years ago, maybe last year. Anyway, it's going away. It's being retired, which is kind of a shame. It was a nice little certification for people who made apps for Teams. It was pretty scoped on that. It was around, it did cover bots a little bit. It definitely covered building apps, messaging extensions, task modules, the manifest, the deployment process and stuff like that. I thought it was good. I had it, I did it. But anyway, it's being retired, it's going away, and as of right now, there is no direct replacement for it. So we're going to have to wait and see what happens there. I think it would be good to have some certification in the mix for Teams developers. But having said that, I can kind of understand why it's going away, because there's a more broad movement, I think, that I do want to talk about in more detail at some point. There's a broader movement around, because the thing is, right, you've got Teams apps, and you've been able to write apps for Teams for a while, but in the last year or so, those apps have started to broaden out. So they're available in Outlook.com. They're available in, Office.com. They're available in Outlook. And so they're not Teams apps anymore. They're like, whatever you want to call them, modern workplace apps. They're like, productivity apps. I don't know what it is. They're not solely Microsoft Teams things. And we're seeing that kind of bleed over with Viva as well, where you've got SPFx, not just SharePoint. It's coming over into Teams, it's coming over into Viva. So there's a lot of like crossing, and adaptive cards are in that mix as well, being something that you can access, you can visualize in lots of different places. So there's a great meshing across all of the applications. So I can kind of understand why they don't want application-specific developer certs. So it might be that it gets replaced with some kind of generalized Microsoft 365 developer of the things, which kind of encompasses all of that. Or maybe they'll get specialized by, adaptive card creating, and then SPFx creating, and whatever they're going to call Teams apps. I don't know. I think it's all to be worked out, to be honest. And I don't have any inside info on that, but I think that would be smart. I think it'd be good. And I think that sort of would speak to some of the changes that are happening around this kind of diversification, if you like, of the extensibility, as the apps themselves become a little bit more, we're breaking down the walls between the apps, which is always, okay, so there's a rant coming, which is good because we're going to end on a high, which is always a good thing. And it reduces that context switching. And that's something Microsoft have always talked about wanting to do, is reduce that context switching. And in fact, that was the whole reason that what became OCS back in the day started off. Microsoft were trying to reduce that context switching between you working at your PC and then the phone ringing and you picking up the phone and losing that context switch of where you were. And they were trying to bring those two worlds together. That's where those kind of first soft phones came in. That whole process that has snowballed and leaves us where we are today. I think Microsoft are trying to do that very same thing. They've been talking about doing it in Teams for a long time with apps. Bring your experiences that you have, your legacy systems, your other things, bring them into Teams so you can keep users in the flow of work, right? I think they're taking that to the next level now, where it doesn't matter if you're in Teams or you're in Outlook or you're doing something, in some other Office application. It's that functionality offered by those applications lives everywhere and is accessible everywhere. And I think that's kind of a drumbeat that is driving some of the changes we're seeing happening, but it's not done yet. So we're in that messy middle where we can kind of see what's happening, but it's not right yet. So it's an exciting time, definitely. And I think 2023 is going to be exciting for that, but also it's a little bit of a messy time. And so we're seeing things like this where the Teams App Dev Associate exam goes away, but there's nothing to replace it. That stuff will get worked out, I'm sure. So reasons to be positive. All right, I'm going to go and drink the rest of this coffee. I hope you have a great rest of the week, whatever it is you're doing. And I will see you all next time.